What if I told you people were tortured for talking to their cat? And honestly, the cat was the smartest one in the room. Welcome to the charming world of medieval witch prisons. Places so messed up, they make modern horror movies look like wellness retreats. These were not cute little stone jails in tourist towns. These were bureaucratic nightmares built to turn rumors into evidence, fear into law, and your neighbor's grudge into your execution. From Germany to Scotland, across late medieval and early modern Europe, entire systems were set up to deal with witches, mostly women, some men, almost always the least powerful people in society. Once you were thrown into one of these lovely facilities, you weren't just waiting for trial. You were being processed, purified, inspected, pricked, and broken in ways that would make any therapist quietly raise their rates. And because this is YouTube, I am legally obligated to say, if you enjoy learning about the worst things humans have ever done while still mysteriously being entertained, go ahead and subscribe. Think of it as emotional hazard pay. The more you subscribe, the more I can justify spending my free time reading torture records instead of, touching grass. All right, deep breath. Grab your emotional support beverage, hug your very non-demonic pet, and maybe light a candle. Not that kind. Number 9. Blessed be the chains. Imagine checking into prison like it's some cursed spa package. Step 1. Lose your name, your clothes, and your dignity in under 5 minutes. When you were accused of witchcraft, the arrival ritual in many places was designed to break you before any questions were even asked. You'd be dragged in, often at night, shackled so tightly your circulation became a distant memory. Your hair might be cut or shaved to remove charms and make sure you weren't hiding magical objects. Spoiler, you weren't, but logic wasn't exactly on the guest list. Then came the purification. Sounds gentle, right? Think more like spiritual hazing. Cold water thrown over you, maybe forced washing, prayers chanted over your shivering body, while officials declared they were cleansing you of Satan's influence. Really, they were just resetting you from person to evidence. Your clothing could be replaced with rough, uncomfortable garments so you couldn't hide a thing. Some prisons even had specific chains or iron collars meant only for suspected witches, because nothing says holy justice like custom hardware. You'd be locked into a cell that was dark, cramped, and strategically miserable enough to make you more cooperative when the interrogation started. The point of all of this wasn't hygiene. It was theater. Every step screamed, "You are unclean, dangerous, already half guilty." By the time the questioning begins, you're cold, hungry, exhausted, and terrified. And the chains aren't just on your body anymore. They're in your head. Basically, medieval witch intake was like airport security from hell. Take off your shoes, your identity, and your hope, and try not to cry while everyone pretends this is for your safety. Number 8. The demon mark inspection. You know that feeling when a pimple shows up on your face at the worst possible time? Now imagine that blemish being used as legal proof that you're in league with the devil. In witch prisons, one of the darkest rituals was the full-body inspection for so-called witch marks or demon marks. Authorities believed the devil left a physical signature on your skin, a mole, a birthmark, a scar, even a weirdly shaped freckle. So if you were unlucky enough to have a body, congratulations, you were also unlucky enough to have evidence on it. These inspections were invasive and humiliating. Your body became a crime scene. Jailer priests, local officials, or hired witch finders would study your skin like they were searching for treasure, except the prize was your execution. They'd poke, prod, and catalog anything that looked even slightly unusual. Extra nipple? Suspicious. Large mole? Suspicious. Random patch of discoloration? Extremely suspicious. And because this is medieval logic, they had a test. If they pricked the mark with a needle and you didn't bleed or feel pain, that proved it was a demon mark. Of course, if you're terrified, freezing, and your circulation is garbage, your reactions might be weird anyway. not to mention the occasional use of dulled needles or trick tools. Funny how the devil always seemed to cooperate with the prosecution. The terrifying part is how official it all was. This wasn't just villagers gossiping, this was written down, recorded, used in courts. Your skin became a legal document, and every tiny imperfection was a signature you never meant to sign. So yeah, next time someone says beauty marks, remember, in a medieval witch prison, that cute little freckle on your shoulder could literally get you killed. Skincare? More like, please don't hang me care. Number 7. Holy insomnia. You, in your bed, scrolling at 2 a.m., thinking, ugh, I'm dying. I only got 5 hours of sleep. Medieval witch prisons, holding their beer. One of the nastiest spiritual rituals used on accused witches was enforced sleeplessness. Not always labeled as torture, of course. Oh no. This was framed as a holy test. If you were really innocent, surely you could handle a few nights of mild discomfort, right? Translation: enjoy your psychological breakdown. The logic went like this. Witches supposedly got their power at night. Secret Sabbaths, flying, meetings with demons, the whole paranormal night shift package. So to break that connection and weaken the devil's hold, guards would keep you awake for as long as possible. Lamps near your face, constant questioning, sudden loud noises, being shaken awake every time you started to drift off. Sometimes you'd be forced to sit upright, hands bound, watched non-stop. After a day or two, your brain starts slipping. After 3 or 4, you're hallucinating, confused, desperate to say anything that might make it stop. And that's exactly when the interrogators lean in with, so, when did you first meet the devil? They call it a confession. You call it whatever words fall out of your mouth at 4 a.m. when reality has left the building. The cruel genius of it is that there are no visible bruises, no broken bones, just a shattered mind and some very convenient statements that line up perfectly with whatever the judges already believe. So while we complain about all-nighters and bad sleep hygiene, remember, in a medieval witch prison, pulling an all-nighter was less college exam and more state-approved psychological destruction. Number 6, the pricking game. Imagine your body becoming a horrible little board game where the goal is to stab every spot on your skin until someone can prove you're evil. In many witch prisons, once they'd found a suspicious mole or birthmark, the ritual didn't stop at pointing and judging. Oh no. They brought in specialists called witch prickers. Yes, that was a real job. Yes, they woke up in the morning, brushed their teeth, and went to work to stab strangers for a living. The process was disturbingly methodical. You'd be restrained or held in place while the pricker went hunting across your body with needles, pins, or custom tools. They were looking for a spot that didn't bleed, didn't hurt, or reacted strangely. That spot, they claimed, was the devil's mark, a place where demons supposedly suckled like some kind of infernal parasite. Cute. Of course, there were tricks. Some prickers used retractable needles that barely pierced the skin, making it look like you didn't bleed or react. Others just called whatever they wanted proof, because they were paid per witch found. Nothing boosts productivity like monetized paranoia. To make it worse, this wasn't treated as random violence. It was presented as a sacred, almost scientific ritual. Officials watched, notes were taken. The moment they found a dead spot, it went into the record like a lab result. Your nerves, your skin, your pain threshold all turned into data points for a trial that was never really about truth. Basically, this was medieval dermatology sponsored by Satanic panic. No anesthesia, no consent, and the diagnosis is always, you're going to die. Number 5, the confession script. You know those moments when someone puts words in your mouth? Now stretch that out over weeks, add torture, and call it justice. Inside witch prisons, confession wasn't just encouraged, it was treated like the main ritual event. The entire system was built around squeezing out a story that matched what authorities already believed. You weren't really giving your version of events. You were being gently, or not so gently, walked into theirs. Interrogations could go on for hours, repeated day after day. They'd start with vague questions. When did you first start dealing with magic? Not if, just when. Then they'd feed details. A black dog, a night in the woods, a mysterious stranger who might as well be wearing a neon "Hi, I'm Satan" name tag. Slowly, under fear, pain, and exhaustion, your brain starts mixing reality with suggestion. The confession itself was often written up by a clerk in neat, official language. You, who might not even be able to read, would be told what you had said. Maybe you were forced to repeat it out loud. Maybe they guided you to sign it or mark it with a cross. The whole thing staged like a ceremony. The prisoner, the scribe, the witnesses, everyone playing their role in this grim little courtroom cosplay. And if your first confession wasn't juicy enough, no problem. Back to your cell you go, and they'll clarify the details. Add more demons, add more conspirators, inflate the story until it satisfies the script they've already cast you in. In modern terms, it's like being forced to star in a crime documentary, where the script is already finished and your only job is to keep agreeing, no matter how insane it gets. Number 4, fast, starve, repent. You've heard of detox diets. Now imagine one designed by people who think your soul is a crime scene. In many witch prisons, starving you wasn't just about saving money on food. It was wrapped in a nice religious bow as a purification ritual. Accused witches might be put on restricted rations, thin bread, murky water, maybe some weak soup if someone was feeling generous. The goal was to weaken your body and supposedly soften your soul for repentance. Sometimes this was formalized as a fast. You'd be told that refusing food showed stubbornness and guilt, but accepting the meager prison diet while constantly praying showed you wanted to turn back to God. So either way, you're hungry. Perfect system. Starvation worked hand in hand with everything else. Sleep-deprived, cold, underfed. You start to lose your grip on time, reality, and resistance. Your body aches, your stomach cramps, and suddenly that idea of just confess so this ends starts to sound less like betrayal and more like survival. On top of that, the guards and clergy could interpret everything you did as a sign. If you ate eagerly, maybe the devil was still inside you, feeding. If you refused food, maybe you were trying to prove you didn't need earthly sustenance because you had dark powers. There was no winning. Your body was a walking Rorschach test for people who'd already decided you were guilty. Think of it as the worst possible version of a spiritual retreat. No food, no rest, no yoga mats. Just a lot of prayer, misery, and the looming possibility of execution if you don't cry hard enough. Number 3, name your coven. Imagine your group chat, but the penalty for leaving someone on red is that they name you as a witch in front of a judge. One of the darkest rituals in witch prisons wasn't about your body at all. It was about your social life. Once authorities had you weakened, starving, sleep-deprived, and half out of your mind, they would gently suggest that you weren't alone in your crimes. The devil loves company, right? So clearly, there must be others. This phase was basically a forced networking event with Satan. Interrogators would push you to name accomplices, neighbors, relatives, midwives, healers, anyone who'd ever annoyed a priest. They'd ask leading questions. Who went with you to the Sabbath? Which women from your village were there when you learned magic? Saying no one wasn't really an option. That just meant more torture until your memory magically improved. The worst part was how this ritual spread like a disease. One accusation from one prisoner could drag 10 more people into the system. Each new prisoner got the same treatment. Isolate them, terrify them, then ask, who else? Before long, the prison becomes a web of overlapping names and stories, all stitched together under pain and fear. And, oh, the records. Scribes carefully wrote down every name, every relationship, every random grudge disguised as holy truth. The result? A kind of demonic family tree, except it's made of gossip, hallucinations, and coerced storytelling. Meanwhile, villagers outside start whispering, "Well, if 3 people named her, she must be guilty," never stopping to think that all 3 confessed after being half destroyed. So while we talk about witch hunts as if they were chaotic mobs with torches, a lot of it was this: systematic, bureaucratic, ritualized snitching under duress. You're not just fighting for your life, you're forced to become the narrator of everyone else's downfall. Basically, it's the medieval version of throw your friends under the bus, except the bus is on fire and the driver is a judge with a Bible. Number 2, exercise, then interrogate. Picture this. You're chained to a wall, exhausted, shaking, and instead of a lawyer, the door opens and in walks a priest with holy water and a very loaded agenda. In many witch prisons, spiritual ritual and interrogation weren't separate. They were fused into this creepy tag team experience where they tried to save your soul while also building a case to kill your body. The logic was simple. If witchcraft is a sin, then confession is a sacrament. So your trial prep becomes a twisted church service. They might begin with prayers or chanting, sometimes an exorcism-style ceremony. Holy water sprinkled on you, the sign of the cross traced over your trembling forehead, relics of saints brought close like they're testing your reaction. Oh, if you flinched, stared, or just looked too weird, that could be interpreted as the demon reacting. If you didn't react at all, that could be unnatural calm. Amazing how every outcome proves they're right. Then, mid-spiritual care, the questions start sliding in. When did you meet the devil? What oaths did you swear? Did you renounce God? They'd urge you to speak truth for the sake of your soul, which sounds noble until you realize truth is just whatever matches their theology. Refuse to confess, and you're resisting God. Confess, and they thank heaven while writing your death warrant. The ritual framing made everything feel inevitable. Guards and clergy could tell themselves they were healers, not torturers. They weren't destroying a human, they were freeing a soul from Satan. You're just trying not to break while they turn your crisis into a liturgy. It's like being stuck in the worst crossover episode ever. Law and Order meets The Exorcist, except you don't get a theme song or a lawyer. Just guilt, incense, and very leading questions. Number 1, the holy farewell. So you've survived the chains, the needles, the fasting, the sleepless nights, and the spiritual interrogation marathon. And by survived, I mean you now have a scheduled execution. Congrats, you've unlocked the final ritual. In many places, the last phase of a witch's time in prison was wrapped in this bizarre mix of doom and piety. On the eve of your execution, you might be visited by clergy urging you to publicly reconcile with God. You'd be encouraged, pressured, to repeat your confession, declare your sins, beg forgiveness, not because it would save your life, but because it made everyone else feel better about killing you. There might be a final meal, which sounds humane until you remember it's essentially the pre-show snack before your public death. Some jurisdictions let condemned prisoners receive communion or say a final prayer with a priest. Others paraded them out of the cell in a kind of grim religious procession. Guards, clergy, onlookers, all marching together like they're attending a very cursed parade. Your body might be dressed in simple garments, sometimes white for purity, sometimes plain and rough to show your lowly status. The crowd would see someone who had confessed, repented, and accepted God, and feel reassured that justice and mercy had both been served. The fact that none of this ever addressed how you ended up there, panic, misogyny, torture, lies, well, that part was quietly left in the cell. The prison's job wasn't just to hold you, it was to transform you from a complicated, frightened human into a clean, consumable story. The witch who sinned, confessed, and died as a warning. Little ritual steps, one after another, turned your suffering into a community event and your death into a moral poster. And that's the real horror. Witch prisons weren't just about pain, they were about narrative control, turning terror into liturgy. If history teaches us anything, It's that power loves a good script, and it will happily edit real people out of the story to keep the plot neat. We like to think we're better now, but anytime fear, rumor, and authority start working together, you can feel the old patterns breathing under the surface. So maybe the lesson here is, question the ritual, not the scapegoat. And if someone says they're hurting people for the good of their soul, start backing away slowly. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.